Hi, everybody. Hi, Matt.
Hello, Glenn. How are
How
you?
are you? Very well, thanks. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
It's a little
Commissioner,
lunar.
you look like you just came in from hunting.
No, being hunted. I try to blend in with those who are hunting me. So
we'll just give it one more minute for folks to trickle in. All right, how about we get started? Good evening, everyone. My name is Clay Purvis. I'm the Director for Telecommunications and Connectivity with the Department of Public Service. We're here tonight to discuss the COVID response telecommunications recovery plan. This is a plan that was funded by the legislature using monies directed to the state through the CARES Act. Tonight we have with us staff from the consulting firm we hired, CTC Energy and Technology. They are going to go through a short presentation tonight, and then we will move to the public comment portion of the hearing. Tonight's proceeding is about getting your public comment on this document. So we have with us tonight Alex Kelly and Matt Dunn, and in a little while they're going to go through a short overview of the plan, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Do keep in mind that this is being recorded. We want your public comment, and we want to have it on hand when we write updates to the draft plan and finalize that draft plan. The final plan will be released on or before December 20th. If you give a public comment tonight and would like to give more public comments, we do have a way on our website for you to leave a public comment, a written comment with us. You can also email your comments to us, and I'll go through that in a minute. When we move to the public comment section of this proceeding, I'll just give you a short introduction about how that'll go down. If you could keep your comments to 5 minutes, we would appreciate it. We'll be keeping time at the end of your comment. After everyone else has given a comment, if you would like to give a second comment and we have time, we can entertain a second round of comments from you. The way we will go proceed with comments, we'll have 3 rounds of comments. The first will be folks who joined by video. And so when we move to the public comment phase, I'll ask folks to raise their hand. Really raise your hand. There's a little button in the corner, the top right-hand corner of the screen, where you can raise your hand, and we will call on you one by one to give a comment. After we go through folks who joined by video, we will move to folks that have joined by phone. We'd appreciate that if you have the ability to now, you could email Corey Chase. It's Corey, COREY .Chase, CHASE @vermont.gov. Please email him with your intent to speak, and he will develop a list, and we will call on you one by one to give your comment. After we've moved through folks who have emailed us their name, we will move to the folks who are joined by phone but cannot email us their name. So that is going to be a chaotic part of this proceeding, but we'll try to get through it, and you will let us know by speaking up that you would like to make a comment. For folks on the phone, you are muted. Folks on video are also muted, but to unmute yourself, if you're on the phone, you press *6. So *6 unmutes your phone and you can talk. When you're not speaking, we would ask that you please remain on mute so that the speaker who's speaking is not interrupted. All right, so without any more talking from me, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Dunn and Alex Kelly from CTC to open up the proceeding with a brief overview of the COVID response telecommunications plan.
Thank you, Clay. I am going to get rolling with a presentation. I want to just let everyone know I've been on Zoom calls all day, and of course, this is the moment when my computer fan is now running on overdrive. I think we can all identify with that. So if we are forced to do a handoff, and of course, the telecommunications presentation is when your telecommunications would fail you. So, but let's what we can. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay?
It's loading.
We can see it, Matt, but it is loading.
Yes, it is doing that. I will assume it will be up shortly. All right, there we are. So what I want to open up with is what this project is, and we are delighted to be here on the video conference is Alex Kelly from Rural Innovation Strategies, as well as Joanne Hovis from CTC Technology.
Can I request the select visual materials be emailed, being that I'm only on a phone? This is Steve Whitaker.
Clay, can you?
Yes, this is Corey.
Yeah,
I have Steve
Whitaker's.
Whitaker's. I have Steve's address. I will send an email. If anybody else would like it, please let me know, either in the chat box or by emailing me.
Thank you. I don't know how you'll do a chat box if you've only got a phone, but.
So I want to be clear what this project was and frankly what it wasn't. This was intended to be a quantitative and qualitative research project to understand the use and lack of use of broadband during the pandemic. And what we did was develop short-term immediate strategies for the pandemic response. And it's meant to address those immediate needs associated with the pandemic. The other principle, though, we wanted to hold to was to not adversely impact the long-term stated goal of 100 megabits over 100 megabits connectivity. And it should, if at all possible, assist in driving towards those long-term state goals whenever possible. We did this project with the assumption that there would be financial resources and staff to be able to act quickly, since this was intended to be a way of responding to the immediate need brought on by the pandemic. And due to the urgency and short timeline, some of the recommendations will be further detailed in the final submission. And we're here to be able to get your feedback on this draft, and so we can actually incorporate that feedback into that process. To be clear, this is not the 10-year telecommunication plan or a blueprint to bring the state to 100 over 100 megabits per second by 2024. That is a different project, and because of the conditions of the RFP and the CARES Act funding that went into it, that this was meant to be narrowly focused on responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we've undertaken a lot of work over the last couple of months in outreach and engagement with folks. So we did hundreds of hours of interviews with over 63 stakeholders. We did an online residential survey with thousands of responses. We then followed up with a phone-based survey to residents, specifically targeting folks who were underserved, since for obvious reasons, getting an online survey would be hard if you were if you did not have adequate internet. And we also did outreach to other critical intermediate stakeholders, so businesses, librarians, superintendents, and town managers, and we got a solid response from each. So to give a high-level core findings, we found that the challenges across the state are with residential connectivity, not with institutional connectivity. There are obviously some exceptions there, but the work over the last decade or so has led to broadband to institutions, both at the state and nonprofit level, but the real challenges are with residential connectivity. And we broke these, residential connectivity challenges into three buckets. One was the unserved due to an infrastructure challenge, so they don't even have the option at their home. The group that is unserved because they cannot afford the connectivity that would be possible, and then the intersection of those two. We did see an intense need for connectivity for remote work, remote education, and telehealth, as well as a pretty significant jump in all three of those. And we also believe from our analysis that using temporary cellular data infrastructure, we can get to over 90% connectivity for the short-term needs. Not a long-term solution, but for this short term, this can help us get through this pandemic and get people an adequate level of connectivity. In order to do this, though, we need to have a mobilization of people. It's a raw labor issue to be able to get out there and get this to happen. And there are a lot of stakeholders, including the communication union districts, that have an important role to play if this is going to be successful. So this is the universes of people that we were talking about. There's the approximately 61,000 premises without access to 25/3 connectivity, 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. There is the universe of people who are low income by a variety of different definitions, but for whom paying for broadband would be a challenge. And then there's the universe of both, and we believe it's somewhere around 13,000 to 22,000 premises that are both low income and unserved. And we were looking at strategies to try to address all three of these groups. So here is the beginnings of the outcomes of the research. Again, highly recommend not just depending on this presentation, but actually looking at the study itself to get into more of the details. But there is a clear concern that there is not adequate connectivity to be able to attend online classes or even to be able to do homework. We've heard from districts real concerns over increased absenteeism, especially for students who are trying to do online learning, and that students are spending, teachers are spending a significant amount of time working on the at-home technical issues that they or students or the students' parents trying to help the students are facing. And it's just a huge time suck and distraction of already a real shift in how they're delivering education. And finally, the stories that I think we've all seen about students that don't have access to broadband, sitting in parking lots and other hotspots. The state was proactive in getting up and out there, but they're having to do their homework from their cars, which I assume this time of year are running. So we also talked to business leaders, and we, for obvious reasons, businesses across the state are transitioning both their work styles for their employees as well as their operations online, and there is. There are some interesting dynamics in terms of the state-run network seeing lower traffic because state workers are trying to work from home, and that we've heard over and over again that workers at home are struggling with that connectivity, and there is some real concerns from businesses about that connectivity problem. And whether it was at their location or at the customer homes, and a lot of the regional development corporations spending a lot of time with businesses, helping them to adjust to an online environment. We also talked to folks in the world of healthcare, and one of the more dramatic changes we saw was the shift to Vermonters using telehealth. And this, I certainly would not have expected this kind of a jump that was reported in the survey results, just because, telehealth is really a new phenomenon for both healthcare providers as well as for patients. But this was significant. Now, there are some concerns that having tried to do that, there were challenges. And one of the interesting ones to flag was that healthcare professionals and doctors who were having to be at home because of quarantine or exposure were struggling from their homes to be able to connect, to be able to provide those services. And so that there's clearly challenges both from the practitioners trying to be able to connect, as well as folks trying to take advantage of telehealth services. Then there we had conversations and received surveys from town managers, and across the board, town managers reported in the survey of having difficulty just hearing from their constituency during meetings, and there were real concerns over the effect this was having on Vermont's democratic process, since so much of it is focused on local government and direct engagement at select board meetings and public hearings and the like. We also did ask how whether folks were actually making a plan for an online town meeting, and a majority of them that responded said that they had not yet. And I think this is going to be a challenge for the state moving forward, especially if we're not able to address these kinds of connectivity issues. The agencies that we talked to that was part of the requests in the RFP actually showed a lot of resilience happening, across state government, and doing their best to make sure that services continue as planned, and also to be able to meet their obligations. And so you saw a number of different initiatives that we've highlighted here. There are certainly some places where remote is being remote connections are challenging, especially for the AOT and ANR locations that have poor cell service or internet access. And then the Department of Libraries that have been called on to be able to provide hotspots, even if they haven't opened their doors to the public, are seeing their infrastructure challenged in many cases. And then we've talked about a little bit of the challenges that are being faced, but there is also still some there are still some challenges in being able to get resources out to folks to be able to provide the telecommunications connections that they really need. So the community institutions have also done what they tend to do in Vermont, which is step up in a real way. And there are some places where it's worked really well, and then some places where we see room for improvement. As I mentioned, libraries are serving a real community purpose, providing Wi-Fi outside of their buildings and sometimes inside. What's interesting is only 2 libraries are doing mobile hotspot lending programs, which we thought was lower than what we would have expected, but are open to finding other ways that they can make a difference. The cable access networks across the state have been really creative in taking their mission to making sure that people are connected, including ensuring that municipalities have ability to share their public meetings with folks at home and through broadband connectivity, assisting with schools and also assisting other civic communities. We heard about, I believe it was the Catholic priest being able to learn how to deliver mass, through Zoom. I mean, these are things that the PEG TV stations have been really on the front lines, doing their best and building out that capacity with their specific expertise. Residents are definitely feeling overwhelmed by attempting to deliver equitable education, even when there is not equal broadband, and having to change a curriculum and sometimes changing it on the fly, as we've all seen the shift from in person to part-time in person to all remote and back again. It's really challenging, and it's particularly challenging with connections being relative, but they're working hard to try to find the best paths forward. And then the CUDs have been out there, taking this moment to advance their efforts to build long-term fiber to the home solutions and using the resources made available by the state to support their work. But they're also doing other kinds of efforts and are really interested in finding ways to help out with supporting low-income and underserved community members get connectivity. So the ISPs that we talk to, have a wide variety of challenges, and the responses vary by technology and provider. We did hear that residential bandwidth usage is up as much as 30%, which is a lot. I don't think this is a surprise, but DSL connections are specifically constrained by capacity, and in some cases meaning that providers are limiting new customers being added because they don't feel like they could support them with the current infrastructure. There's a lot of increased demands for installations and upgrades. Both Comcast and Charter have low-cost programs so that people can get access to the internet much more affordably. but there's low adoption of that. And if you look at the chart to the right, this was the survey results just for low-income Vermonters. And you can see that of these folks that we would assume would all be eligible for Comcast Internet Essentials, only 10% have actually taken advantage of that program, and a majority hadn't even heard of it, and many had attempted to enroll but declined. And so that means that even these efforts by the ISPs to provide connectivity has just been difficult to actually realize. And then many of the independent networks have just gone ahead and provided free service to low-income subscribers in various circumstances, depending on the provider, to try to make those connections happen. So, with all of this effort that's been going on in a Vermont Strong kind of way, with community groups and organizations all trying their best, there are still big challenges. With, as I mentioned before, 61,000 premises about are unserved, meaning it's less than 25/3 connectivity. Low-income Vermonters are disproportionately unable to access broadband connections, and there is a low adoption of either the low-income support programs provided by the ISPs, as well as the one administered by the state. So there's good intention there. It's just not actually getting engaged. And then there are a number of technology and digital literacy barriers that there's lots of time being spent to be able to try to utilize these new tools, prevent folks from Zoom bombing or whatever else, rather than on their core efforts. And right now, there isn't an institution that's staffed and funded enough to be the go-to resource for connectivity issues in a community. Many are making incredible efforts with very limited resources, but there isn't a comprehensive approach at any of throughout the state. So here are 3 emergency mitigation strategies. So one is provide a new broadband service subsidy to low-income Vermonters, and and we'll talk about how to do it, but it's using strategies that have been successful in places like Alabama and Delaware to be able to remove the friction and actually make sure that folks who have access but can't afford it get that access. The second is to connect unserved addresses quickly using short-term infrastructure solutions, primarily with 4G mobile hotspots and signal boosters as needed, because if you have a single signal boost antenna, you can get connectivity through this mechanism, even if you don't normally get great self-service. And then to launch a broadband core to actually go out and implement this and implement it fast, because a lot of it's going to be the legwork of getting these hotspots out, testing to see if they would actually work, if they would work with a signal booster, attaching a signal booster, and just getting it done. And then also being a part of ensuring that people who have questions or are struggling using the technology have that support, that online support, to be able to connect. So the first one is to provide the broadband subsidy to reach low-income families. Again, the models that we have seen work in places like Alabama and Delaware have the state actually involved in contracting to provide connection codes to all of the folks who need it. All right, you are able to get some economies of scale, and you don't have to have folks who are struggling now go through complicated application processes and other kinds of things. You just aggregate it, and you're able to then distribute it much more quickly. And you do that, for a year, assuming that in a year we'll be in a better position in terms of the pandemic, and you just make it happen. And you make sure, the other thing that we would highlight here is that that eligibility is based on income level, regardless of current internet use. And that's one of those odd barriers that if you have broadband now, you may or may not be eligible. Just make sure that they get the connection that they need and not worry about it, so that you can move it much more quickly. And you would also, there are fixed networks where possible that could get subsidy as well as the possibility of doing some connections. But we do believe mobile hotspots, will be the most effective way to overcome the divide in the short term. The second is this notion of when you're subsidizing, you go out and you actually bring this the physical infrastructure through mobile cellular hotspots. You then add signal boosters where they need them, and then our third, real recommendation here is line extensions in the places where there are pockets of unserved, where everyone around these particular homes are already served, which means that it's going to be hard for a CUD or other entity to be able to justify going and building to those places, and just target those for extended service. And we think that is the right thing to do, and we'll address the broadband issues there, at least for a period of time. We took a very data-driven approach to this process, and we've focused in on the known unserved locations. And this was based on the really extraordinary data collection that the state of Vermont has done to identify which premises are connected and which aren't, as well as where there is cell service. And we also looked at the AT&T projected service area once the FirstNet towers are put in place. Those are underway right now, and many of them are intended to be done by the end of the year. So we used a lot of different data sets that you can see on the right to be able to do this analysis. And we used it in sort of a reductive fashion to be able to get to the place where we felt we could, at least come close to providing connectivity to every Vermonter. And you can see these are the different kinds of strategies, and there are all the way down to, in some cases, creating antenna and signal booster subsidies for the last few that could benefit from some of the point-to-point wireless that's available. But just all the way down, we think we can get very, very close if we move quickly. Again, not the long-term solution, not the 100 over 100 that folks are looking for, but it is this, we think we can get to where it's adequate during the time of the pandemic. This is a look at the places that we see as sort of pockets or islands where there is served areas all the way around, but there are just folks who are sort of stuck in a place that isn't quite economically viable or of interest to providers to extend their lines to it, to be able to go ahead and do that. And the recommendation is to take the resources that may be available for this and really concentrate it into those areas, so as to not interrupt the drive towards 100 over 100 that the CUDs are taking on, but to make sure that these folks who are sort of island off are covered. So the final piece is in the how category, and we believe that this is doable, but we got to get rolling. And there is not enough, volunteers or current state employees, surely, to be able to do this intensive lift over the, it could get started, anytime, including this year, to go out and to actually build, help to distribute these cell technologies, to test where other kinds of solutions might work, to see where repeaters need to go, and actually help with the installation in a COVID safe approach. We see the regional planning commissions as being a potential coordinating entity. That's how many of the CUDs have been organized, and because CUDs don't cover every community, that would ensure that all communities are engaged, but the CUDs would be a strong part of being able to do this. And we believe that it would take a 42 member core team to be able to go out and make this happen, and then provide the follow-on support for folks who are needing help with using the technology effectively. This could be transitioned into an AmeriCorps program, but it's that profile which is not needing intensive technical experience, but energy and a strong commitment to this cause, and a willingness to drive the roads of Vermont to be able to help during this pandemic. Here are the costs that we have estimated. Obviously, we could go into greater detail on these pieces, but this is based on our estimates of the unserved in those different categories that we talked about at the beginning. It's $7 million we believe would allow for 1 year of service via the existing infrastructure, 2.4 million for 1 year of service via mobile hotspots, including the hotspots. The experience in other states is that the providers come way down in the cost for that to be able to help facilitate the connectivity. We think there are about 39 towns that have islands of unserved in the middle of otherwise served communities where line extensions would make sense, and that's about 5.6 million. Booster antennas, about $500,000. And those are the big costs out of the ones that we looked at that got us to covering most Vermonters. And then the broadband core itself is between 1.2 and 1.5 million to be able to make this happen and give the technical support that communities need, working with the CUDs and other organizations dedicated to this kind of cause, like the cable access networks and the PEG stations, and others who want to help do that. And we see this really as a group that would facilitate that incredible volunteer and effort that people are wanting to sign up and be a part of. So that's the presentation, the quick overview of the study, and I'll turn it back over to Clay to facilitate comments.
Great, thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate it. All right, so at this point, we'll move to the public comments portion of tonight's meeting. I'll just go over the process again. I know we had a few people join after Matt started the presentation. So we will take public comments in this order. We are going to start with folks who've joined by video. If you'd like to give a public comment, please raise your hand. And by that, I mean use the raise hand icon at the top of your screen. We'll go through that list and call on you one by one. At the conclusion of the folks who've joined by video, we will move to folks who've joined by phone. If you haven't done so already, please email Corey Chase at corey.chase@vermont.gov. with your intent to speak, and we will put together a list and call on you one by one. For those who cannot send an email, we will get to you last. That'll be a somewhat chaotic part of this proceeding, but we will ask you to identify yourself on the phone. If you're on the phone, you'll need to unmute yourself by pressing *6. We would ask that you keep your comment to 5 minutes. And if you have more to say, we'll hold you to the end, and you can come back, and if there's time, you can provide a second comment. Keep in mind, we'll also are collecting comments in writing, so you can email us at psd.telecom@vermont.gov, psd.telecom@vermont.gov, or we have a way to collect comments on our webpage. So you can go to the COVID-19 response telecommunications recovery plan webpage and leave a comment there. If you're not speaking, please keep yourself on mute. All right. So I see 2 hands. Do I have any more hands raised? I did receive an email from someone who needs to leave at 7. So if you want to give a comment, please raise your hand. I can start with you. All right. We will start with Lauren Glendavidian at the top. Lauren, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think that's the pet peeve of this period of time, being unmuted. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify on the COVID response telecommunications recovery plan. There was a lot of work done there in a fairly short period of time, and I understand that the focus is on broadband deployment. We did spend quite a bit of time with Matt preparing, I think, some pretty good data that I've included in this testimony, because that was a big study and it was hard for him to include everything. But I think it's important for the department and the state to really see the substance of what Vermont's public educational and government access operations, known as community media centers, have been engaged in, not only before the pandemic, but obviously during this pandemic. And as a result of that, we have some recommendations that I think fit into the short-term nature and into the broadband core idea that Matt and his team have proposed, but also have some longer legs that I think is important for us to just have on the record, since this plan is to some extent designed and needs to influence the longer-term telecommunications planning of the state. So the first thing I just want to say is that there is, as we all know, a second pivot, if you will, to hybrid public meetings. The first pivot was to virtual meetings, and the second is ultimately, we think, a long-term change, and that is to meetings that are both in person and online. And it's pretty clear that the municipalities that we work with, and we work with, literally hundreds across the state, are in varying degrees prepared for this pivot to hybrid. And the Secretary of State hasn't actually even updated the guidance on hybrid meetings. But from a technical standpoint, in order to meet public meeting requirements, the audio quality needs to be good. The equipment needs to be there for municipal members to utilize. And the guidance needs to be very clear for them to promote public participation on either side of the camera. We have, as the Vermont Access Network, the 25 community media centers, work to put together, all in our own ways, packages for municipalities so that they can get up to speed very quickly on hybrid. But it's clear that the municipal tax base isn't going to absorb a lot of capital requests this year, but that this equipment and operating support is needed by municipalities. So we would recommend that. It isn't really clear to me how this report gets adopted and funded if it has to go back through the legislature, but we recommend that these equipment packages for municipalities and school boards be considered as part of a funding request because it's a short-term need. And there are many of them that will benefit from such packages. Connected to this is what I think the PEG Access Centers have uniquely provided, which is this technical support and management of these hybrid and virtual meetings, not only for municipalities, but for community members to be able to say what they have to say, obviously. And if that work could be tied into the definition of this broadband core, this provision of technical assistance, I think that the Vermont's access centers are in a good position to provide and continue to provide this kind of technical assistance as this, what I would call second pivot, is being made. And related to this is the very important storage that is necessary for these meetings. The video version of these meetings are not really considered the public record. The minutes are, but increasingly the video is what people are going to as and consider to be a public record. So I think the state has to support the municipalities and the public bodies in the archiving of these meetings, which could accrue to the access centers budgets in terms of storage, because we're doing that right now for so many of them, but might have another kind of public, could go directly to the municipalities. But in any event, archival preservation and planning resources are really necessary. And then I do think that this reliance on commercial sector video conferencing like Teams and Zoom really is not in the interest of the state for a variety of reasons in the short and long term. But in the short term, I think we need to revive the Vermont Interactive Television model and see if there is a more cost-effective way to deliver that kind of video level, high bandwidth video conferencing services for regions and localities around the state. I know my 5 minutes is almost up. I will say, this is a little gratuitous, but I think it just needs to be said that the connectivity speeds of 25.3 are not going to meet the needs. Even, I mean, in the short term, I understand what we're trying to accomplish, but we really need to keep our eye on building on the models, these projects that are showing how to get high speed in quick time that the state has funded and have been shown to be able to scale up. And I would build on those projects. And I would do whatever, I think we should do whatever we can to favor local control and not simply local control of the broadband networks and not simply extensions of incumbent operators who to this point haven't extended their service. And then finally, I would say there's 2 points. One is the mapping of our fiber and cellular networks. I would be interested to know a little bit more about where we are with that, but my understanding is that we do not have the adequate mapping that we need for the planning that needs to be done. And then finally, the leadership. I think that the Department of Public Service is constantly being asked to do work, and it keeps getting piled on the department that it just does not have the capacity to always execute, despite the best intentions and the cheerfulness of the staff. And I think the question of leadership around telecommunications decision-making is one that really needs to be addressed so that legislators are not making hurried, uninformed decisions that then accrue to the department to carry out that may not be the best decisions to have been made in that way. So we need to look seriously at our leadership around telecommunications policy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Lauren Glenn. All right, moving on, I see we have Zach Tominelli to speak next. So Zach, if you could unmute yourself.
Thanks, Clay, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to comment on this draft plan. Just by way of introduction, my name is Zach Tominelli. I'm the Communications and Engagement Director for the Vermont Public Interest Research Group, VPIRG. So we're the state's largest public interest advocacy organization, and we have been and continue to support efforts to bring affordable, high-speed internet to every Vermonter. So I'm offering these comments on behalf of VPIRG's 50,000 plus members and supporters statewide. I'll just start by saying that we really appreciate all the work that went into drafting this plan. It is a lot of detail and a lot of information and very, very useful. And at a high level, we recognize and appreciate the challenge of drafting a plan that looks to address the short-term connectivity crisis posed by COVID-19 while avoiding steps that might undermine the state's medium to long-term connectivity objectives. So we believe that the recommendations laid on this plan largely do succeed in doing that. And the draft plan does explicitly state, quote, it is designed to quickly and efficiently bring internet service capable of performing this work while not harming the state's progress toward a long-term 100-100 solution. So what we would recommend, though, is maybe going a step further and even more clearly framing this plan in the context of prioritizing solutions that both address the immediate short-term needs and advance the state goal of providing every home with 100 megabits per second symmetrical. So to us, that means prioritizing fiber to the premises solutions with an emphasis on community-owned broadband networks. And there are many nods to that throughout the plan. In section 5.5, you note the importance of ensuring CUD buy-in to further the short-term emergency planning. That's essential in maintaining a clear and efficient path toward 100-100 service. And in section 8.2.2.4, you note that the state has set 100-100 as a goal, and any investment in long-term permanent investment should be directed toward meeting that goal. So put another way, we wouldn't go so far as to suggest that there's no place in this plan for non-fiber solutions. In fact, we recognize that the time frame considered by this plan and the immediate need to connect the thousands of Vermonters who currently have no service or woefully inadequate service require these stopgap measures. But we would submit that the report go further in recognizing that any of the solutions that are incapable of providing 100 speeds are noted as just that, stopgap measures, and that any resources devoted to those technologies that they are noted that they do run counter to the state's connectivity goals. And in fact, I would say that the presentation tonight actually, I think, emphasized that more than maybe comes through in the report itself. So I think that that is maybe just more drafting than it actually is the intent of the drafters. Looking at the specific recommendations contained within the plan, we are largely supportive of those offered. In particular, we appreciate the focus on affordability. The report highlights something that I think those of us involved in working on broadband policy have recognized, that there are a great many Vermonters who are served by, our standard definition. That is, they physically have access to internet service capable of meeting the federal definition of broadband, but they simply can't afford it. So the low-income subsidy plan outlined in this report is something we'd strongly encourage policymakers to consider. And while it may be outside the scope of this particular plan, we'd encourage an analysis, whether it be by the drafters of this plan or policymakers who are considering it, of how to make such a plan sustainable and permanent, because we do think that the affordability issue will not disappear as the pandemic abates. This is something that will be with us going forward. One specific aspect of the subsidy plan outlined in the report that we would encourage the drafters to reconsider is the 25 gigabit unthrottled data cap minimum. We think that that data usage number is far too low and runs counter to the typical usage scenarios presented earlier in the report. I know those usage scenarios were presented to demonstrate bandwidth needs, but even if you take one of those examples, a household in which 2 students are attending school classes using Zoom and 2 adults are using their broadband connections to attend occasional meetings, send email, etc. A household with that scenario would blow past a 25 gigabit data usage cap within days, probably. I mean, looking at my own usage, I'm in a 2-person household. It's just me and my wife, and we're averaging 400 gigabytes a usage monthly alone. So I'm not sure where the 25 gig number came from. Maybe this came from Alabama or Delaware. I know you were looking at those plans. Maybe it has to do with what could conceivably be negotiated with the providers. But even if it would mean raising the cost of what the overall program is. We just think that that number is probably too low for what we're talking about here. And then finally, on the recommendation of establishing a broadband core to implement and guide these, we think that that is a great idea that merits further consideration, although it does strike us as ambitious on the timeline presented, but we appreciate that ambition regardless. So I think that's all I have at the moment. We'll be submitting some additional written comments that may flesh this out a little bit more, but I appreciate the ability to comment, and thank you for everything that's gone into this.
Great, thank you, Zach. Have anyone else on video who would like to provide a public comment? Please raise your hand. All right, we'll move to folks on the phone who've emailed their intent. The first person I have is Stephen Whitaker. *6 to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it takes a while for this conference bridge to unmute. I am going to somewhat repeat and fill in on my complaints, prior comments made at the prior hearing. The survey work, I will compliment. The surveys are an important piece of both the COVID response plan and the 10-year telecom plan. And so it's good to get those done, and that data will still be useful next year for the 10-year telecom plan. Otherwise, this plan draft plan falls short of anything that's useful. The idea of putting mobile hotspots out as a Band-Aid when they typically might get 10 or 12 megabits per second in download speed and 1 to 3 megabits per second in upload speed, and then hit hard where they're throttled back to 3G speeds and become absolutely useless. They're entirely useless for distance learning, video conferencing, school engagement, which is most critical right now. So to suggest that those will meet the needs of the emergency is, again, misguided at best, absurd would be a more appropriate term. The claim that the need is only for residential kind of flies in the face of all those businesses that are trying to conduct meetings or even get web surfing while they're limited bandwidth out in the rural areas of Vermont. DSL doesn't cut it. Even Comcast doesn't cut it if your cable doesn't cut it if you're trying to do a video conference. So the idea that this is residential only is incorrect. Primarily, this plan appears to have been compromised to the department's kind of failed advocacy over the years. That shovel more money at the incumbents, be it AT&T or Comcast or Charter, with very little effective solutions. We'll be subsidizing carriers like AT&T if we implemented this plan, when AT&T, building on the FirstNet example used in the presentation, not only was granted $25 million of cash from the NTIA that would have come to Vermont, used it to build infrastructure across Vermont, which then they misrepresented where they had coverage. So the state paid a second consultant to go out and measure where AT&T claimed they had FirstNet coverage, and it was untrue. So for us to bank on that kind of accountable partner is again very flawed. I think for CTC and RECE to have agreed to these compromises in the scope of the plan and the scope of what was proposed, I've done a side-by-side comparison of what was in the proposal of what was going to be done versus what is now delivered, and it doesn't match up at all. And it's going to likely get audited, and I would suggest that CTC and REC consider returning all but $100,000 for the survey work, rather than risk sacrificing and damaging their reputation and integrity in an audience. I know they have good skills, but they capitulated to the department on this, and it's painfully obvious. The Wi-Fi hotspot solution for libraries, public, those need to be co-located with adequate backhaul. The state spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, $150,000 with just one no-bid electrician to install hotspots that were donated by Microsoft, but no record was kept of what backhaul they were being connected to. I've just talked to a town office who has a 250 megabit per second connection, but that will saturate with a small number of users. So unless we're connecting these Wi-Fi access points to fiber, gigabit speed fiber, we're really not creating a meaningful solution. And I point out that none of this stuff is discussed in this plan. I call your attention to the testimony in Senate Finance dated June 22nd of this year, where a wireless engineer, Fred Goldstein, who has been retained by the department on occasion as an expert witness, produced a paper, a written testimony and verbal testimony saying that fixed wireless is the only solution we can get out there quick enough to accomplish this. This could be done with existing infrastructure, a party such as the VTA. If VTEL is undesirable as a partner, could rent space on VTEL's towers and put PRS radios in and reach most of these people with the CUDs focused on infilling the gaps where those towers won't reach. That's a real solution that is not even looked at or addressed in this plan. And that's a massive failure of this plan. I'll comment snarkily that to start with those who joined by video is continuing to disadvantage those of us lacking the bandwidth to participate via video. But we'll muddle through. No mention of the pole inventory, the necessary fiber inventory, the fiber-connected public buildings, and Wi-Fi zones with public restrooms available. That's what we will need to get through this pandemic. We will need regional pods to fiber-connected buildings at least 1 gigabit per second with social distancing capable and good ventilation. That's what is necessary to get through this pandemic. No mention of it in the plan. No addressing the false proprietary claims over where our fiber is or where our transparency. I will note for those listening, in addition to the department, that I drew the line. I was willing to offer an in-depth interview with the REC team, but on the condition that they divulge the scope of work of a state-funded contract and the price of it. They refused to do that, so I refused to be interviewed. So that's a problem. Line extensions are, again, a waste of money because they're inconsistent with statute. The claim was made that this was a data-driven approach, yet we ignored one key data point, those being the statute. The statute has 4 principles of competitive choice, open access, not soon outmoded, and 100/100 speeds. None of those can be met by cable line extensions. I think that's probably most of it.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, do we have anyone else on the line who would like to speak? Do we have anyone else who joined by video who might want to speak? Anyone at all? All right. Hearing none, thank you all for attending this meeting. This is very productive. Thanks to everyone who provided comments. If you would like to provide a comment later on, please visit our website where you can submit a comment, or you can email us a comment at psd.telecom@vermont.gov. All right, thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.